Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I guess you already know how this works. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and also make sure to give a thumbs up to this video. So in this tutorial, we're going to be doing sewing this simple beginners project. It's a Kimono Bubu dress and it's going to have pockets at the side and also going to have a v-neck. So if you're a beginner, this project is just for you, so stick with me to the end. So guys, let's get started with the tutorial. Okay, to know the length of fabric you're going to be working with, you're going to get your shoulder measurement divided by 2, then you're going to add your sleeve length to that, then plus 1 inch. Okay, from the edge here, I marked my shoulder measurement divided by 2 and I got 8 inches. So from that 8 inches point, I'm going to place my sleeve length and I'm going to be using 9 inches for my sleeve length. So I'm going to place my sleeve length. Okay, then I'm going to be adding 1 inch of sewing allowance to that. So I added 1 inch of sewing allowance to that, and that's how you're going to know how long your fabric is going to be. Just so you know, my fabric is already on fold, one for the front and one for the back. As you can see, it's on fold, and I folded one for the front, one for the back, and placed the back on the front so that we can cut them together. So now I made a straight line at the top, and that's going to be my top line, and the reason for that straight line is just so I can take measurements from the top of my paper. So that's very my fabric, sorry, and that's very optional. So from the top line, I'm going to be placing my shoulder to waist measurement. So this is my shoulder to waist measurement. Then this is going to be called my waistline. Then now for my waistline, I'm going to be placing my hip depth, which is my waist to hip measurement, and mine is 9 inches. So I'm going to be marking 9 inches across. So from my top line again, or my shoulder line, so for my top line, I'm going to be placing the length of this dress. So it depends on how long you want your kimono to be. So I'm going to be using about 42 inches. So I'm just going to be marking 42 inches from the top line. So now I'm going to be adding hemming allowance of 2 inches. So why are we using 2 inches? Remember that every bodice we have to join the shoulders together using 0.5 inch, and I can't add my allowance here at the top here, so we have to add it at the hem line. So my hemming allowance is going to be 1.5 inches. So please remember this, the hemming allowance is going to be 1.5 inches, and because of that 0.5 inches we need on the shoulder, is going to make it 2 inches. 1.5 plus 0.5, that will give it 2 inches. So now that I've marked that, please don't forget that we have our fabric on fold, because I didn't show you that, so you won't forget that we have our fabric on fold, one for the front and one for the back. So now that we've done that, we're now going to get the width of our neckline. So for the front neck width, we're going to be using 3 inches. So from the end there, I'm just going to be marking 3 inches for my front neck width, and for the front neck depth, we're going to be using 4 inches. Okay, so 4 inches is going to be our front neck depth. Okay, so I'm just going to connect those 2 points together, creating my neckline. Then for the back neck width, we're going to be using the same neck width. The back neck width has the same neck width with the front. The only difference is the back neck depth. And from the top line, or our shoulder line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch, and that is going to be my back neck depth. So I can now just use my free hand, or you can use your French curve to connect the neckline. So I'll just use my free hand to connect the neckline. So don't forget, the reason why we're cutting the back neck line on our front is because our back fabric is underneath the front, so when we're cutting, we need to cut it together like so. So I hope you understood that. So now what we're going to do is, remember that we got our shoulder divided by 2, then we added our sleeve length plus plus 1 inch of sewing allowance. So from that point at end there, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. and that 2 inches is going to serve as our shoulder slope. So I'll just use my ruler like so to connect. Then from that point, shoulder slope, I'm going to connect it to my neck width. So I'll just take my ruler and connect that to my neck width. So after doing that, we're going to determine how wide we want our sleeve to be, and you can go ahead and measure your round biceps. So just know that the sleeve has to be very, very wide. So I'm just going to be using about 10 inches. So I think I was okay with 10 inches. So I used 10 inches, and that's how wide I wanted my sleeve to be. So I just marked that down, because that's how wide I wanted my sleeve to be, because it's a kimono and the sleeve has to be wide. So I connected that to my shoulder slope. So remember that we added 1 inch allowance on the shoulder, and the reason for that is just so that we can be able to hem our sleeves like so. So now we also need to add 1 inch because we need to sew the bodies together. So on our sleeve length, we're going to be adding an extra 1 inch. So I used 10 inches for my sleeve length. Then I'm just going to add an extra 1 inch like so, and that 1 inch we're adding is just for sewing allowance. So now we're just going to come inwards from that end there by 2 inches. So I came in by 2 inches. You can come in by 2.5 inches. It just depends on how deep you want it to be. So now we're going to be working on the hip line, and on my hip line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure what I have on my shoulder line. So I'll just measure what I have from my shoulder line like so. Place my tape at the end here all the way to the center front and measure what I have on my shoulder line. So I got about 18 inches, and that's what I'm going to be placing on my hip line. So note that this doesn't work for everybody, so it depends on you. You can either use your hip measurement divided by 4, then you're going to add extra 2 inches or 3 inches to it, depending on how free you want the dress to be. And don't forget to add your sewing allowance. But for me, I'm just going to be using what I have on my shoulder, and that is what I marked on my hip line. And for the hem line, on the hem line, what you're going to do is you're going to divide your hip measurements divided by 4. So you get your hip measurement, divide it by 4, then you're going to add 1 inch of sewing allowance to that, and that's what you're going to be placing on your hem line. So as you can see, I'm adding my 1 inch of sewing allowance. So now I'm just going to take my curve and I'm going to connect like so. You can use your free hand if you don't have a French curve, but I used a French curve to connect the points from my hem line to my hip line. And I'm just going to take my straight ruler and connect from my hip line. Remember that we came in by 2 inches, so I'll connect to that 2 inch point using my straight ruler like so. So now after connecting, we're going to determine how deep we want our pockets to be. So in the picture, the pocket was quite deep, so from the underarm there, I'm going to mark about 9 inches. So deep depends on how deep you want your pockets to be, so it's your choice. So remember that there's an opening at the front neckline. So for my front neck width, I'm going to be marking down an extra 4 inches, and that is going to be where the opening is going to end. So if you look at the picture, there's an opening at the front, and that is the purpose of that. So now we're going to be cutting out our back bodice first, and you do this by cutting out your back neckline first. Please do not make the mistake of cutting out your front neckline first. So it has to be your back neckline. So I'll just do the rest cutting by cutting through the necessary lines like so. So after doing that, you're just going to notch where we indicated where we want our pocket to be. So this is where we wanted our pocket to be. So you're just going to take your scissors and you're just going to create a little notch over there. Please let it not be too long or too much or too wide or whatever you want to call it. So now that we've cut our back, we can now go ahead and take off our back piece, and this is how the back piece looks like. Okay, so now we can now go ahead and cut out our front piece. So So this is our front piece. Now that I've cut out our back neckline, we can go ahead and cut out the front neckline, and that's just almost all for the front. I remember that we came down 4 inches from the front neck depth, so we're just going to be slashing that open. So I'll just take my scissors like so, and I'm going to slash it all the way to the neck depth at the front. So guys, this is what we have for our front, and now we can go to the next step. So now we're going to be creating a facing, and here I'm going to be using this black lining fabric, and I'm going to fold it into 2 like so, and I'm going to place it underneath my front piece. So making sure that the folded part of the lining and the folded part of the main fabric, they are on the same place. So now I'm just going to place this underneath, and I'll use my pin to hold it down just so it can't move. Then I'll take my scissors, and I'm just going to cut out the front neckline first. And what we're doing is that we're tracing the neckline on the facing, and I'm also going to cut out the shoulders like so. So now remember that we came down by 4 inches from the neckline, so we need to indicate that on our facing. So I'm just going to mark that same spot on our facing like so. I'm just indicating it on our facing. So after doing that, we can now go ahead and slash that line open just like we did for our front. Just take my scissors and slash it all the way to the 4-inch points that we made like so. So now after doing that, we have to determine how wide we want our facing to be, and on the shoulder I went with 5 inches. On shoulder I went with 5 inches, and from the 4-inch point over there I came down by 5 inches also. And I'm just going to use my free hand, or I can also use my French curve and just draw a curve. So feel free to use whatever measurements or how wide you want your own facing to be. So this is going to be our front facing, and now that we're done with the front facing, we can go ahead and work on the back facing. So on the back facing, I'm also going to be folding in my fabric, and the reason why I'm using this black lining fabric is because my main fabric was not enough. So you can go ahead and also use your main fabric, so feel free to use whatever fabric you want. So now I'm just going to place the folded part of my back piece on the folded part of the lining underneath it, and I'll use a pin to hold it down just so it won't move. Then I can now go ahead and take my scissors and cut out the back neckline just like I did for the front, and also cut out the shoulder. So I forgot to cut out the shoulder here, but I immediately corrected that later. So please don't forget to cut out your shoulder too. So after doing that, I can now go ahead and determine how wide I want it to be, and for the neck depth here I made it 7 inches. Then on the shoulder, you have to make your shoulder the same thing at the front. I made my 5 inches at the front, so mine was 5 inches at the back too on the shoulders. Then I cut out. So now we're going to be working on the pockets, and I'm going to be using this fabric for my pocket. Like I said, my main fabric was not enough, so I had to improvise. So I'm just making a mark here because it's very hard to tell the wrong side on this fabric. So this is going to be my wrong side. So with the right side facing right side, I'm going to fold it into 2. Then after folding it into 2 again, I'm going to fold it again like so, just so I can get 4 pieces of the pockets. So now I'm just going to create a horizontal line, and the reason why I'm doing this is just so I can get rid of that rough edge at the end. Then I'm also going to create another line at the bottom like so. So this is optional. Then I'm going to make the how wide I want my pockets to be. I'm going to make it about 7 inches. So I'm marking 7 inches from the end over there. So I marked 7 inches, and I'm just going to place my my hands like this, just so I can confirm if it's wide enough for my hand. Then I'm just going to create a curve round my hands like so. So after doing that, I can now go ahead and cut. And please, when cutting, make sure to add your 0.5 inches of sewing allowance around your pocket. If you notice, I'm not cutting through the marker lines. I'm actually adding 0.5 inches allowance round. So just like you can see, we have 4 pieces, 2 for the front and 2 for the back. So I've already gone ahead to iron interfacing on my facing, and the interfacing I used was gum stay. That's what they call it here in Nigeria. So I iron gum stay fusible interfacing to my facing. So this is my back neckline, just like you can see, and with the right side of my back facing the right side of my main fabric, I'm just going to pin it down like so. Then after pinning it down, I'm just going to use 0.5 inches to sew the neckline. Then I'm also going to take my front piece with the right side facing right side like so. I'm going to take my pin and pin it down. Then I'm going to be sewing the neckline using 0.5 inches and following that V shape that we have over there. So after sewing, this is what we have. You can see how flat it laid, and the reason why it's laid flat like this is because I actually notched it, and after notching I ironed it. So I'll just use the back piece so I show you guys what it means to notch. So this is the after sewing the back neckline, this is how it looks. So as you can see, I'm just taking my scissors and making small notches on the neckline, and the purpose of making notches is just so that when I flip it over, it won't budge and we have one kind smooth or finishing. So I'm just making notches. Then after making the notches, I'm just going to flip this over, and then you can take this to your pressing iron. After flipping this over, you can take this to your pressing iron and press this flat. Make sure to do this for both your front and your back. So now that we're done turning the neckline and doing all that and ironing it, now remember where we notch for our pockets. That place we notch is where we're going to be placing our pockets. So I'm just going to get one of the pocket pieces with the right side of the pockets facing the right side of the main fabric like so. So I'm not going to make the right side of pockets face the right side of main fabric, making sure that it meets that notch point we made on the fabric. And I'm going to sew the side using 1 inch sewing allowance. So remember that we have 2 sides of the front, so also make sure to do the same thing on the other side of the front. That place where we notched, you're just going to place the pockets. You're just going to place the pocket right side of pocket facing right side of your fabric. Then you're going to pin it down, and you're going to sew using 1 inch of sewing allowance. So also make sure that you do this for your back piece. Don't forget that your back piece also needs a pocket. So like you can see me here, I'm using 1 inch to sew the side like so. Then I'm just going to make my notches. Then after making my notches, I'm going to stop stitch, and I'll do this by making sure that the seam allowance I have on the inside is facing my pocket like so. Please make sure when you stop stitching it's actually facing your pocket. Then you're going to now take this to your machine and just stop stitch like so. Then you can just go ahead and press this with your pressing iron. So after fixing the pockets and all that, we're now going to be working on the shoulder. And what you're going to do is we are going to place the right side of your back piece facing the right side of your front piece, making sure that the neck points meet like so. Then you're just going to flip this facing all the way to the other side. So just like you can see me doing the video, I flipped it, and the facing, it's like the facing is facing the facing and the main fabric. So I'll just go through this again, make sure that it meets on the neck point, right side facing right side, flip one of the facing to the other side, making the facing face the facing and the main fabric face the main fabric. Use a pin to hold it down, and just going to sew the shoulder using 0.5 inches. So make sure to do this on both sides of the shoulder. So now you're also going to hem the sleeve. remember that 1 inch allowance that we added on the shoulder. So that's the purpose of this. So you're just going to flip the sleeve by 0.5 inches like so. Then after folding by 0.5 inches, you fold the 0.5 inches again. Then you're just going to sew. Make sure to do this for both sides of your sleeves. So after joining the shoulders and also hemming the sleeves, now we're not going to be, you're just going to flip this to the wrong side, making sure that the right side faces the right side like so. And you're not going to sew here by 1 inch, so the size using 1 inch. Then when you get to the pockets, you're going to use 0.5 inches to sew the pocket round. You're going to sew all the way down using 1 inch. So I'll go through that again. 1 inch, 1 inch. Then when you get to the pocket, you're going to use 0.5 inches to sew it round. Then 1 inch all the way to the bottom. Then after sewing, you have to sew the both sides. After sewing the both sides, you're now going to hem the bottom by using 1.5 inches. So you just fold in 0.5 inch, then fold in 1 inch again. Then you're going to hem the garment round. So guys, this is how the finish looks. You just look at how neat it is. And I was really happy that I used a black pocket because I just like the effect that it gave me, and I was really happy with this choice. So guys, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. See you next time.